Hello and welcome to the 192nd episode of The Thriller Zone. I'm your host, David Temple. And before I introduce today's guest, allow me to say thank you for making our show one of the fastest growing thriller fiction podcasts in the world. You know we couldn't do it without you. Secondly, hello and thank you to Steve Stratton for single-handedly sponsoring this month's show. And lastly, is an invitation to subscribe to our YouTube channel at The Thriller Zone. Okay, now on with the show. You know our guest is the author of 30 novels spanning the last 20 years. I know, unbelievable. Including several which have landed in the top charts with his Jason Bourne books. I'm pleased to welcome, for a return appearance, Brian Freeman. I do want to say that the book that we're going to be talking about today, Break Every Rule, is... I'm going to save a little piece of my accolade for just a little bit, but I'm going to say this was a damn fantastic read.
Thank you.
Not just really good, but damn fantastic.
I've been really thrilled with the early reaction to this one. So.
Brian, I'm going to save some of that again for later in the show, but I thought I knew your level of professionalism, acuity, swagger, etc. I thought I had a pretty good handle on it. But then this book comes along, and I thought, I'm looking at the cover, and I'm like, okay, cool cover, me and covers. And then I'll look, oh, geez, 400 pages. Can he keep me going for the 400 pages? And if my wife, Tammy, were not on another call right now in the other office on a Zoom call, I would say, come in here and tell Brian exactly what it is. And she'd say, Brian, every little spare minute David has, he's squirreled away in a corner reading your book.
Nice.
And I finished it just this morning.
Excellent.
And folks, for those of you who don't know Brian, he's the guy who writes Jason Bourne right now, for one. Which, by the way, hold that thought. Where did I put it? It was right here. I'm going to give you a little props to this, too.
Thank you. There we go. I haven't even seen the book yet, so you're way ahead of me. So.
You haven't seen this one?
I have not, no. I have the arc of this one, but no, I have not actually seen Bourne myself yet. So.
Okay, well, number one, this is a beauty. As you can see, I did start it. I'm sorry, I did start it because, folks, you can't open a Brian Freeman book and expect to just go, I'm just going to take a little taste. No, it's classic Bourne style, and you won't be able to put it down. Maybe you'll come back and talk to me about this one?
Absolutely.
All right. That is on my list of things to do. This, of course, we're talking about today, and should I tell you the inside secret? Yeah, I don't know if you knew this or not. I'm doing a top 20 summer reads show. You know I do that every year. Well, last year, actually, it was 10 books, and then I realized that's stupid.
There's a lot of summer reads out there.
And when you're doing 2 books a week, basically, and we are now, halfway through the year practically, I had to increase my my count, so you made it in the top 20.
Thank you. I love that.
I think you may be surprised just to find out just how far up the 20 you went, but we're going to save that. Let's do this. Let's get caught up on what's new with you. Tell me what's been going on since last we spoke, just so we can kind of get caught up. Yeah.
Well, there's been a lot of creative stuff and a fair amount of significant personal change as well. I think I can't remember if when we last talked I had made the big move to Florida yet, but now Marcia and I are after spending our entire adult lives in Minnesota, we are now officially full-time Floridians.
Okay, last time we spoke, you were living in Minnesota, but you had a place that you would go. I don't know if you had a second home, but you frequented it quite a bit.
We've been in Florida for vacations for years, and I think the last time we talked, we had purchased a place down in Florida, and our intent had been, well, we'll winter down there and kind of go back and forth for a few years and see how we do. We came down here early November of 2022, and by the end of the winter, we were so thrilled with where we were living and the community and the people that we said, why go into the time and expense and hassle of hiking back and forth across the country a couple times a year? And we said, you know what, we want to be at home in one place, and so we consolidated down here, and I now do most of my writing outside. In fact, Break Every Rule was the first book I wrote completely in Florida, and most of it I wrote sitting outside on the lanai, which was just great. So
awesome. And now, do I know what town in Florida, or are we keeping that a secret? And either way,
we're on the East Coast between Cocoa and Melbourne, so probably 15 minutes from the ocean, which is great. We're still west of the 95, which I like. A little bit more protection from those hurricane winds, but anytime I want to go dip my toes in the ocean, 15 minutes and I'm there. So.
Oh, well, congratulations.
Thank you. That was a big change, and it meant that last year I felt sort of guilty because I think I only wrote one book last year. I mean, I'm sort of used to doing 2 or 3, and one book. Wow, man, you're really slacking off there. So, but I'm making up for it this year because this is going to be another 3-book year here. I've got 2 Bournes on the slate. One's already done, and then I'm about halfway through a new standalone for Blackstone, and then I'll be diving into another Bourne after that. So yes, it's going to be another busy year here.
Oh my goodness. Now, dude, I did not realize. I mean, and forgive me, I keep up pretty well with you, but I can't remember everything about everybody. But I knew that you were doing 2, so 3 is a stretch. You're doing, so we got the one that we just talked about, which is The Born Shadow. That's done, of course. I'm sitting there looking at it. The one that is coming is the one you're working on now?
Actually, The Born Shadow I turned in last year. So there's another Born book, the Born Vendetta, which will come out in January. That's done in the end. And now I'm working on a thriller called, it's actually more of a pure mystery. I haven't done a pure mystery in a few years, so I'm really excited about that, called Photograph, and that's going to be my next Blackstone book, so that will be out sometime in 2025. And then once I get that done, I'll be turning over to the next Born, which will come out next summer. And we're still working on the title for that one, but yeah, they're keeping me hopping.
Wow, I am so in awe of your talents. I really am. I'm not blowing smoke up your skirt. And I'll tell you why. I have very specific reasons. You have an ability to create. There's going to be some listeners that hear this and go, really, Dave? Yeah, okay. But I don't care. It's my show. They're fully fleshed out. They're real. I feel them. I understand them. They have plenty of history. You don't beat me over the head with the history. You have such an impeccable sense of setting. So you tell me where you are, what the world is. You paint that world. Again, you don't belabor it. What I noticed about this book, and I'm going to finish and let you take a bow in a second. What I realized about this is how much dialogue in this book. And what I love about that is really true storytelling, the conversations. It goes back to our time sitting around the campfire, just hearing the conversation. Those are the big 3 or 4 reasons I love this book.
Yeah, it's always finding that sweet spot of how much description that you include, and what I always tell people is I like to paint my scenes in watercolors. I like to provide just enough information to seed the reader's imagination, and then they fill in the details and gaps around it. So I'm sort of involving the reader in the creative process, as opposed to feeling like I have to give them 110 details to sort everything out so it's exactly my vision. I actually want to share the creative vision with the readers and let them kind of build the story out, whether it's the characters or the descriptive scenes in their heads. So yeah, that's always a very careful balancing act of just how much you provide.
And I'm telling you, folks, that is a deft craft because, and it's so interesting that you say that, Brian, because I think it requires, and it's one of those mistakes that I think novice writers like myself make. We go, we don't trust, here's what it is. We don't trust the reader to either remember the things that I told you early on,
Right.
And that's not the case. Or that they won't use their imagination perhaps to fill in the blank. And what you're saying right there is going, this is what you need to do, is put the trust in the reader and let them do that. I know that sounds painfully obvious, but
no, that's absolutely true, and I think you always have to be conscious of pace. Certainly, when you're writing mysteries and thrillers, you're not looking to slow the reader down, and I never want to get between the reader and the story, or the reader and the characters, where they're stopping. We have some great prose stylists in this genre, but every now and then I'll be reading one of their books, and I'll kind of feel like the writer's sitting there next to me going, that was a great paragraph, wasn't it? And as much as I love the artistic content there, I don't want to be slowing the reader down. So if it's not advancing the story, if it's not advancing the character, it's got to go, and that's hard. So and I will say, I'll let you in on a little tip. I tend not to have very long paragraphs, and I think people note that. If I've got a very long paragraph with a lot of detail into it, it's probably likely I've tucked away a little clue somewhere in the middle that a reader's likely to just kind of skip past and think, oh, well, that's just one more detail, in this paragraph. Well, I know readers are impatient people. They kind of tend to phase out when those paragraphs get too long, but don't do that, because I've probably planted in something in there that you should know about.
oh my God, yes, you're right. And now that you've told me this, and I look back, and that's one of the reasons I like your books, is you don't go, a lot of people will put lots of description and then a little bit of conversation, then more description. That's boring. Some people go all conversation and no description of what's going on. So that's kind of challenging. There will be those, and I just ran across this recently. They're going back and forth between a conversation, but they don't land me those tiny little reminders as to who's saying what. And I'll get all the way down the page, and I'm like, oh, Jesus, who's saying what? And then I got to go back, and I'm like, so anyway, you have found
it's also, the he says and the little fillers that go in. It's not just about the dialogue and the description. It's also about setting the speed of the dialogue for the reader. So there are times where I want them to be slowing down because the dialogue is slowing down. There's a pause between what the person is saying to each other. So I'll include a little bit of description, even if it's just a sentence, to deliberately slow the pace of how the dialogue's unfolding in the reader's head, because then it's going to feel more natural.
So good. All right, hold on one second. I'm going to reach for another. Here's a book here I want to mention, and a book right here. Okay. The reason these books are stacked, they're part of this upcoming show that I'm doing. There are 3 books. Now, there are more than 3, folks. Settle down. But there's 3 that if someone said, David, this is your final show of the year, you're retiring, you're dropping the mic, give me just 3 books that you read this spring into summer that are master classes in writing. And here they are. Number 1, Matterhorn by Christopher Reich. This is your show, Brian, so don't be afraid. We're coming back to you. One of the best books I've read this year, and a master class in spy storytelling and pacing. Number 2, Shadowheart, Meg Gardner. She is a master class in and of herself. Phraseology, words, pacing, making you think. And the 3rd, I don't know if you've heard of this guy, Break Every Rule by Brian Freeman. A master class, and you want to shove a lot of information into a book, and only 400 pages. And I'm talking about this. I'm talking about plot. I'm talking about characters. I'm talking about action. But here's where you really got me. You put a lot of heart in it. So you got all these bad guys and good guys, but there's heart woven into the very core of the story and takes you right to the final page. And when you can leave it going, the adrenaline is still rushing through my body from the action, but there's nearly a tear in my eye because of the heart. Wow.
Yeah, I really try to write thrillers with an emotional core, because I think that that's what really connects the reader to the story and the characters, if their emotions are engaged. So I totally agree with you. I mean, it sounds weird to say, you can read a thriller and feel like you're going to have a tear in your eye at the end, but to me that's kind of the highest praise I can get from a reader, is if they were that engaged in the character that they're really feeling those intense emotions as they go through it.
All right, we're going to take a quick short break. We're going to put that phone on silent because it's dinging and it's going to drive me crazy. And when we come back, I'm going to give you an inside secret behind Break Every Rule. And we're also going to find out one extra little secret, a little goodie that I wanted to talk about that is about this character. So say hi to our new sponsor for the month of July. Stay with us. We'll be back with Brian Freeman right here on the Thriller Zone in a minute. Welcome back to the Thriller Zone. I'm your host, David Temple. This is Brian Freeman, author of Break Every Rule. Welcome back.
Thank you.
The first rule in defending your family is break every rule. And that's one of the biggest reasons I like this book. You took a message that's at the core of every man. Oh, you going to mess with my family? Oh, no, you're not. So as I teased before we went into break, I have this question, and please say yes, please say yes. Is Tommy Miller coming back?
I don't know yet. I'll tell you from a cold-hearted, practical standpoint. I absolutely hate second books in series, because they can be terrific, tremendous, great books. A lot of times, number two, I think, in series are better than number one, and they sell like crap. Every single, I've got a bunch of series out there, and I'll tell you, every single time the second book was always a disappointment from a sales standpoint. And so I'm always at this point, I'm very wary of second books in series. So you'll certainly see in Break Every Rule that I left the door open that I can bring Tommy back. And I love him as a character. There's certainly other interesting stories that can be told. But at the same time, I'm always in wait and see mode at this point when I do a standalone. Do I actually, is there enough reader response that I'm going to go ahead and do a second book in the series? And I don't know. So I don't rule it out, but I don't automatically rule it in at this point.
All right, I'm going to get on the horn with my good friends at Blackstone. I have a little pull over there, Brian. And I'm going to say, I want you to break every rule and come after Brian to get a sequel on this. No, I'm kidding. All right, here's why. He is that quintessential everyman. He's got enough of the training, but he's enough of us average guys. He's got a great sidekick. And to your point about leaving the door open, I was reading those last pages. I'm like, how is Brian going to tie this up? And of course, I won't read it. But that last paragraph, which is only this big, you can't read it, that door goes.
Right. And I also think it's important when you're thinking about whether a standalone becomes a series. There has to be some emotional resonance and reason to do the next book. It's got to still be a part of the characters' lives, not just I'm taking the character and dropping him down in the midst of a story. For example, I've got 11 books in my Jonathan Stride series, and when I think about a new Stride book, I don't start thinking about the plot. I start by thinking about where are the characters in their lives, what's going on with them, what emotional and psychological issues have they not dealt with that I think I need to bring to the fore in terms of the advancement of that character. And then I take the plot and I start building it around the characters so that the issues of the plot force the characters to deal with the things in their personal stories that are significant, that I want to connect to the readers. So it's like in the Bourne books, I'm kind of straddling that fine line here because Bourne is obviously an action hero and an action character, and yet I'm trying to write novels in which Bourne as a person is evolving and changing and maturing and dealing with a lot of issues, whether it's emotional issues dealing with the women in his life or dealing with secrets from his forgotten past that affect who he is as a person and what his moral identity is. So, I'm trying to do all those kinds of things. So I think with someone like Tommy Miller in Break Every Rule, I was in Tommy Miller, I wanted to create a character that sort of had the best qualities of Jason Bourne and Jonathan Stride. I mean, a really interesting, deep, complex, moral character who's had to do things that he may not himself be that comfortable with, and yet he did it in the context of what he thought was a greater good. Well, that's something that Bourne has dealt with as well. And at the same time, he's dealing with sort of a mystery in terms of what actually happened and what the secrets were that his wife was hiding. And so in that respect, he's a little bit like Jonathan Stride as he pulls together the pieces of the puzzle. But then it's like, okay, you've got this character now, and this particular mystery is all about sort of his personal life. What's next? What else can we do in terms of him as a character where the plot would sort of bring out more about who he is as a person? If you can do that, then there's somewhere to go with a series. Otherwise, I think you leave it as a standalone.
All right, guys and gals, you just went to class right there. What you just said in that paragraph, Brian, really is kind of the quintessential example of that, an explanation of that. And I hadn't thought about it that way, but as you were unpacking that, I thought, oh, okay, I get it, because it's such a full-fledged story of an A, B, C, D, get to the end of E, and you have to solve multiple things, make some rescues, reunite, etc. And then I see what you're saying. If you said, okay, so now Tommy's, make sure I don't give anything away, built this life, and then you take him out of this story, which was the entire journey, and you go, let's put him into a new situation. I get your point. I hadn't thought about it that way.
It's like a few years ago I wrote a book called The Deep, Deep Snow, and it was a psychological mystery with a rural female sheriff's deputy named Shelby Lake, and she was the narrator and the heroine in the book. Very emotional story. It was a finalist for the Edgar Award, which was a great honor. Audible, started out as an Audible original. Now it's available in print and ebook as well. Audible came back to me and said, we'd love to do a follow-up book with Shelby Lake. And I said, well, I could simply do another Shelby Lake mystery, but I think emotionally there's a part of Shelby's past that covers the whole book that is a mystery for the reader. I think we'd be better off doing a follow-up book that's really not about Shelby, but about how Shelby came to be. And so I wrote the Ursulina, which I struggled to define what it is, because it's a standalone, and yet it's a prequel, and it's also a sequel, and it's really not about Shelby, and yet it's all about Shelby. But that was how I dealt with sort of the idea of a second book in the series, and yet it also stands alone.
All right, I get that. I want to go back to something, because you said something, and I caught myself going, wait, I want to hear more about that. And I know a few of my listeners who are real into analyzing a lot of the mechanics, the structure, how to build a story in a world. And it's this. So you made a comment, and this was really, I don't think I've ever in almost 200 episodes had anyone say this to me. So it's very interesting to me. You caught my attention. David, I have found that the second book often does little to anything. And I had to stop there for a second and go, wait, what? But it's Brian Freeman, for crying out loud. So help me understand that. So do you have any idea why that happened? And has it happened repeatedly?
Every single time.
Oh my God.
Every single time. I mean, take The Deep, Deep Snow and the Ursulina. The Deep, Deep Snow was a New York Times bestseller, huge success. The Ursulina, in my mind, as much as I love The Deep, Deep Snow, the Ursulina, in my mind, is probably the best book I have ever written in my life. It sold a fraction of what The Deep, Deep Snow did. It's just the absolute nature of the game that second books in a series, you can cut in half what they're going to sell, because readers, stop and think, oh, wait, do I have to go and read the first book first? And not necessarily, because I always write series so that you can really dive in anywhere. But there are just a lot of readers where if it's a series, they need to start at the beginning. And if they haven't read the first one in the stack of to be read piles next to their nightstand, it's hard to get them to embrace a second book. So
Okay.
it's just a marketing reality. So.
Okay. I get it. I hear you. I can follow that. I don't personally roll that way.
I agree. Yeah.
If I find somebody good, like if I had just stumbled onto you and this is my very first book, I'd go, good on you. And I'm going, is there a series? No. Yeah, but I know by the guy who's crafting this story, I'll go back and read anything you've written now. I mean,
yeah, and it's hard too, because I think there are writers that I think all writers grow and change and mature the more books they write. But there are some writers that have definitely improved as they've gone along, and not to say their early books were not good, but I look at someone like Peter Robinson, who was absolutely one of my favorite writers. I got to know him initially through his book In a Dry Season, which was well into the Alan Banks series and was just one of the best books I've ever read. I went back to the very beginning of the Alan Banks series. I read the first couple of them. Not that they were bad, but honestly, they didn't grip me in the same way. If I had started there, I'm not sure I necessarily would have continued with the series. And so I'm glad I discovered it later on, because Peter had gained so much power and maturity as a writer as he continued with that series. So it was better for me to discover him kind of at the peak of his creative power in the series, as opposed to where he was starting out, and I think still kind of getting his hands around the character and the storytelling.
Wow. Okay. Now, I'm sitting here, I've got pulled up on my other screen God, you have such a list of books. So I'm going to run them down real quick. Just bear with me. And was the Agency your first book?
The Agency. No, that was a little side project that I did with my agent in London in the probably about 2008, I think 2009, somewhere around in there. It's nothing like any of my other books. It was practically chick lit. I mean, it was funny. It was a fun book to read. It was female first person narration, and it was all about this literary agent and going through all these crazy things. Not a thriller, not a mystery, just a lot of fun.
Okay.
Yeah, totally different from anything I've done.
It must have done okay, because you came with what looks like, West 57th looks like a chick lit, as you said.
Yeah. And there's sort of a sad backstory on this, because the Agency, as I said, it was a project I worked on with my agent Allie in London. Allie O'Brien was the author name we used, the pseudonym. And very sadly, my agent Allie passed away in 2014, very, very unexpectedly, cerebral hemorrhage. I mean, she was 45 years old. It was just crazy. And so, we'd been talking for a couple of years about a sequel follow-up book to The Agency, and I had to really think about, did I want to do that with Allie no longer around? But ultimately, I had what I thought was a great story, and so I wrote West 57, and it was just plain fun. I mean, it's such a fun book to read. But again, it's sort of in a separate genre all its own compared to everything else I've done.
Gotcha. My old stomping ground in West 57th. Now, so Immoral, was that where? That's a murder mystery, it looks like.
Yeah, that was the first in the Jonathan Stride series. Yep.
Got it. Okay, so then we went from Immoral to Stripped, Stalked, In the Dark, The Burying Place, The Bone House, Spitting Devil, Spill Blood, Turn to Stone, The Cold Nowhere, Season of Fear, Goodbye to the Dead, The Night Bird, Marathon, The Voice Inside, Alter Ego, The Crooked Street, The Deep, Deep Snow, The River Falls. Then we get into The Born Evolution, Funeral for a Friend. I remember that one. Infinite, The Ursulina, The Born Treachery, Born Sacrifice, I Remember You, great one. The Zero Night, Born Defiance, and Born Shadow. Wow. Dude, just a prolific world of.
I think Break Every Rule is number 30 in 20 years. So I'm pretty proud of that.
30 in 20 years?
Yep.
Dude, okay, I'm just so amazing. Okay, I want to make sure I've asked everything. Yeah, okay, I get it now. I get it. Tommy Miller. I have to put my passion for Tommy Miller on the shelf and make sure that maybe
what we need to do is go out and sell a ton of Break Every Rules so that everybody comes back demanding we have a number 2 in the series. So.
Well, I'm glad you should mention that way because, by the way, this show will drop July the 8th, which, if I'm not mistaken, your book drops on, I wrote it here somewhere.
September 10th.
September 10th. So I can do one of two things, Brian. I can have it still drop here in July as I had planned and stack those pre-orders because I'm that I'm that big of a fan of this book, or I can push it down the road to September if you want it closer.
I think readers. I don't think readers always appreciate how important pre-orders are. I mean, they are. If you're going to get on the bestseller list, it's because of pre-orders. I mean, it is that bubble in that first week where all those sales in 1 week versus sales of 6 months of people wanting to get that book in their hands and start reading on day one. So I say let's get it out there and get everybody pre-ordering the book. It is so important. If you have an author whose books you love, the best thing that you can do to support them is pre-order their next book.
Did you hear that, folks? Pre-order is the magic word. Well, a very big, powerful, super hot kingmaker agent in Hollywood told me not that long ago, I'm not going to say his name, said the magic to hitting the bestseller list is pre-orders. I had not probably fully captivated that thought before in my mind before, but once he said it and then I started watching trends, I realized what Brian just said is true. So, to that end, let me be the first to say, this is in the top 3 of my favorite books of this year so far. And I'll be more specific in my top 20 summer reads show that will air. Has already aired. I just realized will have already aired by the time this airs. So everyone will know by now how much I love this book. Yeah, you can't. Listen, I'm not always sharp. So, folks, pre-order this book today. Every once in a while, you hear me rave about a couple of things. You don't hear me rave a whole lot. Well, yeah, you hear me rave a lot, but you don't hear me rave like this. This is a book that's going to be on your shelf this year. You're going to read it this summer or fall by the time it actually drops, ish, and you're gonna love it. And if you don't love it, I don't know what's wrong with you. I almost said, "Or your money back," but I'm not going to do that. Okay, now let's get into, as we start to wrap, because I know your time is precious, and I'm always so grateful to spend time with you, Brian. This is different than my closing question, which you know what it is. But that secret sauce, there has to, and you've kind of alluded to it already, Brian, and I feel like I'm talking too much, and I'm not letting you talk enough, but there's something about, you have a secret sauce about you, and I'm trying to figure out what it is. So tell me what I think. Give me an idea what you think it is.
That's a tough question, and I don't know if I can give you a satisfying answer because I think I tend to ask myself that, and people will ask, well, where do your ideas come from? And it's probably one of the most common questions that you get asked. And I can certainly talk about having a file in my phone with lots of story ideas and characters and things like that. But the reality is, I don't know where all of it comes from, and I'm honestly fairly cautious about asking too many questions about that or probing it too deeply, because wherever it comes from, I don't want it to stop. And I think if you ask too many questions, you sort of run the risk that the inspiration is not going to be there. So I tend not to take a lot of credit for my books. Frankly, when things are really rolling, it feels like there is some other force that's sort of guiding my hands along the keyboard, and I am grateful that happens. But where it comes from, I'm honestly not sure, and I'm just happy it's there. So.
You know what I think it is, and you said it 2/3 of the way back, and when we were talking about having a heart at the core of the story, I think that is your secret sauce right there.
Yeah, I do not want to be creating the characters. I want to sort of be more of the diarist, where I am letting the characters tell their story through me, and that to me is very important. That I want the characters to be authentic and to use me as the vehicle to get to the reader, as opposed to me trying to actually build out those characters. I mean, there was I did an event once where another mystery writer was on a panel, and people. The question was about plotting, and if you reached a point where the character was seemed to be moving in a different direction that was going to be screwing up your plot, what would you do? And this other writer said, well, I would change the character to accommodate my plot, because the plot is what I've set up. And I said, I get it, but I feel completely differently, that if the character is taking me in this direction, the character must know something that I don't. And so I don't pretend that I'm smarter than the people on the page. I think if the character's taking me in a direction, I want to follow that, and odds are what they're going to come up with for the change in the plot is better than where I started. So,
you know, and a lot of people could look at this conversation and go, you guys are being pretty dang woo-woo about it. However, I've got to tell you something. Artists, painters, musicians, writers, etc., pottery throwers have in my personal opinion, have a personal, visceral connection to a creative source. You can call that whatever you want. But you cannot poo-poo the idea that when you sit down and you allow your fingers or your hand to write, however you get it on page, that you are channeling in some form or fashion, and I'm not talking anybody satanic stuff or anything that's anti-biblical, of course. But, sorry, I just had to do that. You're channeling. Your creative energies are all going. So I'm with you. I say the character knows better than I do. Let me just follow the character.
Yeah, honestly, it's why I don't get too bent out of shape about all the AI stuff, because ultimately I think the human element is still what makes the difference, and will always be what makes the difference. So.
I'm glad you brought that up, because everybody's banging on my door. What do you think about AI? Are we out of work? Are we going to lose our jobs? No. If the essence of AI is gathering information and just basically regurgitating it, that's one thing.
Right.
But to create something original or to create heart inside of a story, that's human.
Yeah, as one of my characters says in the book I'm working on now, that when it comes to AI, it's a lot more A than I. So.
Bingo. All right, as we start to wrap, we've asked this before. I'm going to ask it again. This one I do know you have an answer for. It has to do with your best writing advice, and everybody who's as prolific as you, 30 and 20, has a pretty good idea of a piece of advice they'd like to pass along.
Well, I feel guilty because you know damn well I'm going to say the same thing I've said for the last couple of years.
Which is perfectly fine, because we all need to keep hearing it. Yes,
and it remains true to this day that 100% of unwritten books have never been published. So, and, it seems very simple, but by God, there are so many external factors that get in the way of the very, important process of simply getting the words on the page. I say this to aspiring writers, because if you don't think that it's still an issue after 30 books, I'm here to tell you it absolutely is. And particularly, when you're now living down in Florida and the sun is shining and it's a gorgeous day and the ocean's 15 minutes away, if you don't think there are an awful lot of days where I'd rather do just about anything else than stare at that blank screen.
I share a little piece of that with you. We're not even 15 minutes. We're about 4 minutes from the beach, and we're in, outside of San Diego. So between Del Mar's Dog Beach and La Jolla's Torrey Pines Cliffs, I've got the best slice of walking, which I've been doing since this procedure, since day one. And I'm telling you, I can wake up in the morning and go, yeah, I could sit down for a couple hours and bang out some words, or I could just go walk.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, but that's where discipline comes in, and you have a heap of discipline. Can you give me just an inside scoop, kind of how your day runs? I don't ask this very often, but it's kind of cool inside scoop I like.
You know, it kind of depends on where you are in the process. I mean, there's the creative process of building out the story and the characters. There's getting the words on the page, and then there's the editing process. I love the editing process because I love to just tweak every word and get it just perfect. I don't know who it was that said, I don't particularly like writing, but I like having written, which I think is absolutely fantastic. But when I'm getting the words on the page, which is the longest part of the process, most days in the morning, I'm editing what I did the day before, and that's getting me back into the story and the characters, and I go through to the point that I've been editing, and then hopefully there's enough of a wave that it kind of rolls me right on into the next chapter. And then most of the time, most of the actual new words get done in the afternoon.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, folks, you've heard it from a master, 30 and 20, one of my favorite guests. I want to tell you, Brian, when Tammy always checks my schedule before we go on, and she asked me as we were having dinner last night, who's on the show tomorrow? I said, Brian. Oh, good. He's always fun to listen to.
Well, that's good.
I said, Brian is a good interview. He's enthusiastic. He's warm. He's caring. He's not afraid to give me his secrets, so to speak, and he's just always cranking out good books. So, man, I wish you always the best. And I want to say, folks, if you want to know more, bfreemanbooks.com.
B. Freeman Books is where it's been for 20 years. So.
Okay, well, there you go. Don't change a thing. bfreemanbooks.com. Check it out. Do yourself a favor. Pre-order this book, as you will now. There it is. So as you found out 1 week ago today, this placed at number one of my favorite books of the year.
Well, that I am just overwhelmed. I truly am.
There should be fireworks or something, for crying out loud, folks. Hello? No, it deserved it. Anyway, Brian, once again, always good. I know that I've got Born Shadow. When's this one dropping?
Earlier, actually. That'll be July 16th. So.
Okay. Sadly, I won't be able to make that one because this is one of the last shows I'll be doing for a little while. I'm taking the summer off.
Good for you.
I can't believe it. I'm taking the summer off. I'll come back right after Labor Day, and I'll catch you on your next book, or I'll read this one and love it so much I may have to dial up your publicist.
Well, I've been really thrilled by the responses to Born Shadow. I mean, a lot of folks saying it's the best of the Borns. So, and I try to reboot the series. That's another thing to do with series is I try to reboot it every few books. So Born 5 here, I kind of wrapped up the threads through my first 4 Born books, and now this is almost sort of a reinvention of the series again. So
I don't know how you keep it all straight. Well, enjoy the rest of your summer. Welcome to your new hood there in Florida, and as always, thank you so much for spending time with me.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks again, Brian. And folks, I hope you'll join this podcast next week when we welcome Bruce Borges to discuss his book, Shades of Mercy. And then we wrap the month of July already with a debut author who's taking the world by storm. Henry Wise joins us on July 22nd to discuss his novel, Holy City. Until then, and pretty much every day in between, I'm David Temple, your host, and I'll see you next time for another exciting episode of The Thriller Zone.